Hey everyone, Romel here, and today we're going to be building this Tofu65. This is a 65% mechanical keyboard by kbdfans. It offers a fully aluminum case. We're going to be using their solder PCB, an aluminum plate, and some novelty cream switches for this build. The Tofu is a keyboard that's popped up on this channel several times now, but I haven't actually made a full build video on it yet. In this video, I'm going to take you through all the steps necessary on how to build this keyboard, as well as some of the mods that we can do to help make the keyboard sound and feel a little bit better. I wanted to go with an initial D theme, one because of the keycap set by kwertiekeys. It was initial D, and I thought that it kind of tied all of the things on this channel really well. If you guys are new here and haven't seen my old logo, it used to look like this, and it was heavily inspired by Initial D and all of the sim racing that I was doing. I wanted to tie those two together in my logo, and I thought this looked pretty cool. And the name Tofu always reminds me of the Fujiwara tofu shop for some reason. Also have links in the description below for all of the parts that we use and for tools. Some of those links will be affiliate links, and as always, if you guys decide to use that link, it really helps this channel out. The total build cost was about $500 Canadian. Anyways, let's get started with the parts. For a custom mechanical keyboard, there are certain parts that you'll need. First, you'll need a case. In this case, we'll be using a Tofu65. Next, you'll need a PCB. For this, we'll be using the kbdfans. And then you'll need a plate. We'll be using an aluminum plate. The Tofu65 is a tray mounted case, which means that the PCB is directly screwed into these standoffs at the bottom of the case. This necessarily isn't the best mounting style, as it gives a pretty stiff typing experience and the sound is not the most consistent. Later on in the video, we'll be adding some foam and O-rings to see if that'll make for a better sounding and feeling keyboard. Next on the list are the switches, stabilizers, and the keycaps. For the switches, I went with the novel key creams. These are a linear switch that have an actuation force of 55 grams, a bottom out force of 70 grams, and a travel distance of 4 millimeters. I used some 205 G0 to make them sound and feel a little bit smoother, because out of the box, you'll notice that they are very scratchy. I also went with the creams because the beige color makes them kind of look like little tiny pieces of tofu, and I really wanted to stick to the theme. We'll also need a set of stabilizers. These are what's used to stabilize the larger keys like the spacebar, shifts, enter, and backspace. For the Tofu65, we'll only need 3 2U stabs and 1 6.25U stab for the spacebar. The right shift is only a 1.75U and doesn't require a stabilizer. I went with the Durox stabilizers. The ones I have on hand were the V1s, but there are also the V2s available now that fix the wire popping issues that occasionally happened. Next, you'll need some keycaps. These are the initial D themed keycaps from kwertiekeys. I really liked how they looked, and it is literally the theme of the keyboard. These went for about $55 Canadian. I also picked up the desk mat from kwertiekeys at the same time to save on the shipping cost. For modding, you'll generally need some type of lube for the switches and the stabilizers. In today's build, I'll be using Tofu65 G0 on the creams and the housing of the stabilizers. For the stabilizer wire, we'll be using dielectric grease. You'll also need a switch opener to open up the switches and a small paintbrush to apply the lube. You can also get yourself a lubing station, but this is totally optional. Depending on your switches, you might not need to lube them, but I would always recommend tuning your stabilizers to get the best sound and feel. For the miscellaneous tools, if you need to solder, you'll need a soldering iron. I have the Hako FX888D, and I would keep a solder sucker on hand in case you need to desolder a switch while you're building. Another nice to have is a set of small tweezers to test the PCB, as well as if you have any bent pins, it makes it a lot easier to make those straight. Once you have all of these parts, it's time to build. One thing that's always recommended to do is to test your PCB as soon as you get it. All you need for this is a set of tweezers and a key testing tool. I like to use VIA for this. You'll need to touch the 2 contact points where the switch goes in with the tweezers to activate the key, and you just need to go through the whole keyboard and make sure each key lights up. If you plan on lubing your switches, I would allocate a couple of hours if this is your first time. I usually watch some anime if I do it off stream, but if I'm streaming, I typically listen to music and chill with chat. If you guys haven't followed me yet, my Twitch is twitch.tv/RomelDriss. To lube a switch, you'll need to open up with a switch opener. Once you have the switch opened, you'll see all the parts that make a switch. There's the bottom housing, the spring, the stem, and the top housing. I would recommend opening these up and putting them into separate containers or bowls to make organizing a lot easier. For the creams, I lube the bottom housing with Kwertiekeys as well as the stem. For the springs, I bag lube them with Kwertiekeys 105. If you don't want to get extra lube for your spring, you can also use the 205G0 and apply a bit on the bottom and top of the spring. Remember that with this process, less is more. You want a nice thin layer of lube on whatever you're lubing. You don't want to over lube your switch, as that can make it feel worse. After you're done one switch, you just have to repeat this process about 70 more times to fully lube your keyboard. Next up is the stabilizers. For this, I'll be using Kwertiekeys 205G0 on the housing. Again, just a nice thin even layer. I do it on the outside of the stems and the inside of the housing. Once you have these lubed, I put them back together and apply some dielectric grease on the wire and pop them back in. After you're done all of these, I'll put them on the PCB and test out to see if there's any rattle, and keep applying lube as you see necessarily to eliminate the rattle. You do need to be careful, as if you do over lube your stabilizers, they tend to feel mushy. Once you're satisfied with them, it's time to assemble the keyboard. To get started, you'll need to put the plate onto the PCB and to start popping the switches in. I like to solder the corners first just to ensure everything stays in place as I'm popping the switches in. And as you're putting these switches in, make sure that none of the pins are bent and that both of them go through the holes. Once you're all done, I would double check to make sure that you put the switches in the right place, especially for the ones that have multiple layout options. I've made this mistake several times now with the DZ60, and it's best to put some keycaps on and put it in the case to ensure that you have the layout that you want, or just to make sure that all your keys are where they're supposed to be. I think this is a very important step, especially if you're soldering, because once you solder, to move the switch or to fix it, you need to desolder it, and that can be a pain, especially for your first time. Once you're sure that the layout is correct, the next step is to start soldering the rest of the switches. If this is your first time soldering switches, I wouldn't rush it and take as much time as necessary. The process that I use is to heat the pad a bit, put some of the solder, and then move on. You don't want to spend too much time with the soldering iron on the PCB. I do clean the tip of the iron with the steel wool thing that came with the Hako every few switches or so. After you're done soldering, I would plug the PCB back in and check each key in VIA. If you have any issues with a specific key, I would double check to make sure that you actually soldered it, as I've missed pins in the past before. And if you have and you've doubled and triple checked, it's time to desolder and test out a different switch. After this is all done, you put it inside the case and screw it in place. Once it's all screwed in, put your keycaps on and you have a fully assembled Tofu65. Here's what this Tofu sounds like after all of that. Like I said earlier in this video, we will be doing a slight mod where we use some foam as well as O-rings for the screws to make it feel and sound a bit better. If you guys haven't seen Keyboard's video yet, I'll have a link in the description below, but he goes into a lot of details on how to do this mod properly. I would highly recommend giving that a watch, as it does make a difference when it comes to the sound and the typing experience on the Tofu. Here's what that sounds like. Anyways, that's gonna be it for the build. I hope you guys enjoyed that and learned how to build a custom mechanical keyboard. If you are looking to build your first custom mech, the Tofu is probably a keyboard that you've encountered. It might be the only keyboard that's in stock, or it's usually in stock. There are other options out there now, like the Bakaneko, the NK65, the KBD67 Lite, but those are hard to come by. You usually have to be pretty fast when they get in stock, or you have to buy them on Mech Market, and it might end up costing you more than. With the mods, the Tofu does sound and feel a little bit better. If you have any questions or are interested in building your mechanical keyboard, you can hit me up on Discord or join the Discord. I'll have links in the description below, and I do stream on Twitch whenever I get the chance. It's twitch.tv/RomelDris, and feel free to ask me any questions about mechanical keyboards, switches, keycap sets, whatever you have. I do my best to do a lot of research, and I am starting to try out a lot more switches and keyboard builds and all. I will be putting out more keyboard related content, but I still have mice reviews. I have a bunch of mouse pads that I'm reviewing as well. And yeah, if you guys haven't subscribed and enjoy this kind of content, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. That's gonna be it for me in this video. I'll catch you guys in the next one.